Darkest greeting, horror, sci-fi, and extreme French horror fans. Welcome to another edition of Extreme Horror, Sci-Fi, and Beyond. I am one of your co-hosts, Eric White, and I'm here today joined by the lovely Jackson Harmer.
Howdy, y'all. And once again, Drew is not with us because he's a weenie.
He's a bit squeamish when it comes to these movies. He keeps threatening to watch one and do a live reaction to it. And I suggested a lot of really bad ones for him. And he immediately recoiled. So we'll see if that ever actually happens.
I honestly think he could handle the one we're talking about tonight.
Oh, yeah. No. And honestly, this is probably, is it Gaspar Noé or Gaspar Noah?
I think it's Noé.
Noé?
I was watching a video essay about this movie earlier today, and that's how they kept saying it. Which I don't know. I'm not good at French.
I'm not either. I'm just going to say
you would think it would be whatever is the shortest way to say the word because they leave out a lot of letters. So you would think no, but Noé also seems to make sense in my head. I should have done better research.
We should have. We're sorry, everyone. We're getting off to a really good start on this podcast right now.
Well, we should probably do some like top of the show topics to kind of ease us into the madness and hellacious film that we're about to discuss. Did you see that it just dropped like yesterday or something, the trailer for the new Robert Zemeckis movie?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
It looks wild. It is it's I
don't know what
from
to
a
make
single shot. I don't either. I am excited about like the prospect of it, but at the same time I'm like, but why? Like it feels like an experiment that didn't need to happen.
I don't know.
Like a feature length scale.
I'm kind of always rooting for Robert Zemeckis. He has fallen far short in the last decade or so.
Since like Beowulf, really.
I don't know.
I like Flight. I do like Flight.
Flight is really good. I actually kind of like The Walk. I mean, it's not as good as Man on Wire, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is doing a preposterous French accent in that movie. I kind of admire what that movie was trying to do. I didn't ever see Allied. I heard it was actually pretty good, but I never saw it.
I didn't realize that was a Robert Zemeckis movie.
It seems way outside of his wheelhouse, right? And then I didn't see Welcome to Marwen. I heard that was a disaster.
Oh, I've heard it's bad.
Yeah, but then
I love the documentary that's based on though. The documentary again is
I've never seen
really
that,
good.
Yeah. But Pinocchio is one of the worst pieces of garbage I've ever witnessed on screen. But I'm always rooting for him, and I'm glad that he's trying something different. It's a very unconventional film. Apparently it takes place, the trailer doesn't show us this, but apparently it goes far into the future.
Like I know it starts in the past
in like prehistoric times and then goes through a contemporary segment, but apparently it ends far in the future. So
it looked like Robert Zemeckis's version of Tree of Life. When I first saw the trailer, I was like, this is like a Terrence Malick movie, but made for comic book people or something. You know what I mean? Like that's what it felt like.
But just the idea of doing it all with one camera angle, like that is a wild thing to sell.
Yeah, I don't even know how is it just like single scenes? Is it just like a speed up in time? Do they time lapse into the future? Like I don't know. I don't know
what this movie's gonna be, but I'm kind of excited for it. It's something different,
If you couldn't dance, what would you do? Suicide?
Well, I was speaking of something different. Yeah, Gaspar Noé or whatever.
Or how familiar are you with Gaspar Noé's movies?
Not very. I've seen Irreversible. I've seen clips from. He doesn't even have that many movies. I've seen clips from Love. That one seems kind of boring.
I mean, I've never seen Love. That was his like 3D movie. It was when the 3D craze came out. Yeah.
And then I saw the trailer for Enter the Void and thought it looked really interesting, but the runtime kind of put me off of it.
It's like 2.5 hours. And it's
Right.
very long. And I want to say that Irreversible was also pretty long, but I don't think it was quite that length. But
I don't think
Irreversible
it's. I think that one just feels long because it's
oh
painful
my God.
to watch.
It's so painful.
But
It
I
is
don't think
probably
it's
his,
actually. I think it's under 2 hours.
well, that makes sense. But it's probably Irreversible is probably his most like notorious and or well-known movie of his.
Right.
Because it is so unflinching, especially in two scenes, which are two scenes that I think about sometimes occasionally, and I'm just like, oh gosh.
I think everybody knows that the centerpiece scene of the movie. Everybody's watching this has at least heard about that scene.
Right. But don't frown on the fire extinguisher scene either, because that one is also
it's
really rough.
It is very difficult to watch. But that's like the beginning of the movie, right?
Oh yeah. Like it's in the first like 10 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So this man is no stranger to controversy and or shocks. I read an interview with him, and it was after this movie came out and got fairly favorable reviews, and he was very shocked by it because he was like, no one should like my movies. They should divide people. Like you should either like them or hate them. It's like they shouldn't be generally favored. And so, which leads us into Climax, his best reviewed movie ever.
I can see that, and we'll get into it as we go along. But like, the first half of this movie is really fun.
The first 45 minutes, yeah, everything, and it sort of leads you in. So I guess basic plot, we'll jump into that real quick. So basic plot of this movie is a dance troupe are rehearsing, going through their final rehearsals. They're all staying together in this sort of compound, and then
it's a school.
It's a school. That's right.
It's like an abandoned school. Yeah.
And so they are on their final day. They're having a little break from rehearsals, and they have a little party, and someone has spiked the punch with LSD. And then it all falls apart from there. Which I will say, I'd heard about this movie. I didn't watch the trailers going into it because I knew I'd probably watch it because I'd seen Enter the Void. So I didn't know exactly what was going to happen for the longest time, like watching this movie, because it sort of throws you off balance at first, because the beginning of the movie is all on a television set, and it's all these sort of like disconnected interviews of like our main characters,
with really interesting choices for like what's around the TV. Because there's like a stack of books on one side and a stack of movies on the other. And I was I was getting distracted from watching the talking heads by trying to parse out like what all was on the shelf next to it.
Just like Suspiria, which ties into the school. And like
Possession.
Possession is over there as well.
There is a scene later in this movie that is very evocative of the most famous scene from Possession. Zombie, what is it? Fulci movie?
Yeah, from like the 70s. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Oh, Salo, 120 Days of Sodom is on the shelf.
Yeah.
Over on the book side, you've got like Nietzsche. I didn't pay as much attention to those because I wasn't as familiar with the titles. But I did notice Nietzsche, which nihilism and
nihilism. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I guess it's little breadcrumbs that kind of clue you in to what you're about to get into, but
that's not even really the beginning of this movie.
No, you're right.
Over the opening shot, which it gives you no context. It's just this woman, and it's like a God's eye view overhead, and she's stumbling through the snow, and then she falls down and she's writhing around, and it turns out that she's bleeding and there's blood getting into the snow, and it's like, okay.
Which apparently was improvised. That wasn't in the script at all. Like they just had a park nearby when they were shooting, and they're like, let's shoot a God's eye view of this lady in the park, the intro of this movie. And then the credits run backwards at the end of that before we get into a brief little title sequence, which is really just setting up your production companies, and then we jump into the introducing all of our characters, which there are a lot of.
It's hard to keep track.
It is really hard to keep track, which I think is part of the choice, because if it had just been like 5 characters, I don't know if it would have. It's very disorienting having this many people and like trying to. So your brain is always trying to think of like who this person is and remember them and remember their name.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to keep up. But I don't mind it, because some of the characters are a little throwaway. They're like main ones we kind of double back on from time to time. But yeah, it's an interesting way to introduce our cast, is that they're essentially answering questions, I guess, to get into the school.
It seems to be like an interview tape and these people are all auditioning for this dance troupe. The school, it's not a dance school. It's like an old school that nobody's using anymore. And they're
Right.
using it as a rehearsal space slash, boarding area before they go off on this international tour.
And it's a little, because it moves really quick and it's all in French. So it's hard to like parse out some of the details of what they're talking about. A lot of it's about dance. There is a pretty like blatant sort of like Easter egg buried in there with and I forget her name, the blonde lady who talks about her roommate, I believe, like
she's the only one that's not French. She is German, which I wonder if there's some sort of like veiled metaphor there.
Maybe.
And she's the only one that regularly speaks in English. Well, there's the girl that she's sort of talking to throughout the movie, but she seems to be French and she's speaking English to the German girl because it's a language they both understand.
If you're paying attention, I guess it's really like setting you up early on to like, oh, something bad's going to happen with this.
Yeah, because she says that she's fled Berlin, not fled, but she's left Berlin because the art scene there is just a lot of drugs, and her roommate has been dosing himself with acid through eye drops, and she just wasn't really into that scene anymore. And she's happy to be in France, where it's just more about the art of dance and everything like that. So
it's really interesting watching this on a second viewing. I guess we should say spoilers at this point, because really like everything she's saying is a lie. And then really if you knowing that everything she says during the movie starts to take on a different meaning, like anytime she's like talking to like a different character, really starts to feel different than it would be if you were just introduced these characters for the first time. How many times have you seen this movie, by the way?
Just twice. I saw it once in the theater when it came out, and then just another time today. I've watched clips of the dance sequence, the 100%. Main dance sequence, like over and over again because it's spectacular, and we'll talk about
that. So good. So yeah, after they go through all these interviews, there's a couple of like loaded things in there where they talk about drugs, and there's one with the two gentlemen, I don't remember their names, but they talk about never having worked with gays before. So it's all these sort of like setups that like, where is this going? It's like these sort of like breadcrumbs that it may get bad, because it's a Gaspar Noé film, so you assume at some point that someone's going to get hurt. Yeah. And there was one last one that one of them talked about, like basically dance was his escape, and that he was escaping hell, and he was like, where is hell? And he was like, here, basically, which is the last little thing. And it kind of
is that Omar that says that? I can't remember which character says it.
I don't think it's Omar. It's the character, and I don't remember his name. It's the one who has the girlfriend, who's pregnant with another person's baby. It's that character, but I don't remember his name because there's so many characters, like 20 characters. But I think it's an interesting sort of dichotomy between the world he feels versus what they eventually get into later on in the story. The first title we see right after all that. So there's this long, it's almost like a 10-minute sequence of just like straight up interviews that are just like jump cutted in between. Right after that is a superimposition title that comes on, and I believe it says, "This is a French film and proud of it." And then it rolls into the most epic, wonderful dance sequence I've seen in a film in a very long time.
It's almost hard to believe what you're seeing, the way that these people are able to move. And which brings us into kind of the way this movie was produced. It's pretty interesting. None of these are actors except for two. Sophia Boutella, who plays kind of the leader of the dance troupe, and then I don't remember her name, but the woman that plays Lou, the one that ends up being pregnant. They had acted before. None of these other people had ever acted. They were professional dancers. They were cast for their dancing ability. And then this movie did not have a script.
Yeah, it's 5 pages. It was like a 5-page script.
It was just like just an outline, just a premise, basically. And Gaspar Noé, and apparently he does this a lot with his actors. Like he comes up with an idea and then collaborates with his cast to flesh out the story and the characters, which I think is a really cool way to work. I can't believe that somebody who is as technical of a director as he is with his camera movements and everything is this loose with his cast. And with his story, because it seems like everything is just planned all to the nines, but it's just this improvisational process that he works through.
And I think that was probably because I read somewhere that they did like, so this movie has like many long takes.
Second half of the movie is almost
It's
one
one.
long take.
I think I can't remember who it was. It may have been Sofia Boutella. Said that they would do something like 13 or 14 rehearsals or takes before they finally got it right. So like there are like sequences of this movie that go on for forever. So including this first dance sequence, which is all one take that builds into the party beginning. I think they did it like 4 or 5 times before they finally got it right. So like, and I don't know how they work in particular, but like I assume that it becomes like a rehearsal to get precision right, but there's a lot of room for play in those rehearsals. That's what I can only assume it would be.
And I think it's evident in that because this dance sequence, like the way they're moving is very precise, but at the same time, it still seems loose. Like everybody dances a little differently. There are some sequences where it'll be like, one dancer or a few dancers will come to the forefront and do a little routine, and then everybody else is just kind of milling around, and then everybody will like walk in different directions and move this way and that, and then all of a sudden you have a whole new group of dancers doing a completely different thing.
Which I think this was the only dance, because there's another sequence in the middle where there's a top down like God's eye view of the dance, but I think this was the only one that was choreographed beforehand. I think the other one was like,
I mean, it would have to be choreographed
just because of like the camera moves that are involved in this one, which is like moving from the DJ out to a wide, then back up and looking down. So it's so precise in like how everything moves in this sequence.
It's really unbelievable.
It really is. We are underselling how wonderful. If you don't believe us, go look up the dance sequence on YouTube.
And the whole thing is it's very like sweaty and sexy, and it looks like they're just having a party, but it's also precisely choreographed that I don't even know. I can't really talk about. Do you dance, Eric?
Not very well. But and I especially don't like modern dance, as most of them are doing, but their bodies move in ways that I can't even like fully explain. Like they become almost like their arms almost become dislocated, and like they can.
Everybody's double jointed in this dance troupe. The guy at the very beginning of the dance that starts spinning his arms in like alternating windmill motions. Like I can't fathom how somebody does that.
That's when, so like it starts out and like they're starting to dance. And I'm like, oh, they're just doing a dance. It's just going to be like a little dance sequence. And then he starts spinning his arms and I'm like, oh, and then it just keeps going and it just keeps building and like.
And the music is just a banger. And it's not the kind of music I would just listen to, but when you accompany, I can't say that word. It's hard to say. Accompany it with this sort of dancing. It's just enthralling, and you get really into, and it's very repetitive. It's just the same over and over again, but the bodies in motion in front of you just add so much to the music.
Well, it's like, and I'm just gonna pull this out of thin air right now, but it's sort of like the monotony of life in some ways. It's that monotony of life is this sort of repetitive day-long beat, but it's the motion inside of it that makes it unique, makes it interesting, which is probably a lot to do with the movie and maybe the themes of it, is that humanity essentially devolving out of from being sophisticated talking people into complete monsters by the end.
Anyway, so the dance happens,
which just builds into another, the take never ends. Basically, it's like the dance happens, which is like a full 5-minute long sequence, and then it becomes a roving camera. And we're just kind of following our characters around the party as it starts going. We find out that the instructor, I believe the person who maybe owns the group or is like financing the group. I don't know what her role is.
I think she's the choreographer.
Okay.
And then Sofia Boutella is like the manager. I think. The movie doesn't really tell you. This is based on just the Wikipedia summary of it.
Right. And it doesn't really matter too much, but basically someone who is sort of like outside the group, who is like helping them, has made some sangria for them to all start having a party with. And so everyone starts imbibing, they start drinking and having a good time. We move around, we start introducing our characters to each other and how they interact. Also in this there's one other person outside of the dance troupe that we introduce here in this opening sequence, what I think is pretty important, is the character of Tito, who is the son of the choreographer dance lady who runs the group, who's a young son, very precocious,
Yeah, maybe like 6 years old or something.
Something like that. But after all that, after we introduce our characters again, we end on them and they're talking about birth and abortion and death and all that sort of stuff. And then we end with a title that's like, "Birth is a unique opportunity." And I don't know exactly what to make of it in terms of the movie. Because the movie is bookended by another title at the end, which is
Like-
"Death is an extraordinary experience," but it's like upside down. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that title.
I don't know.
There.
I mean, we keep choosing these like very sort of pretentious European directors to cover on this series. So
We're gonna get raw with it next time, and we'll find an American that everyone can get behind, or maybe not. Maybe everyone will hate. Who knows? But after that title, we essentially move into another sequence where we're witnessing two characters talk to each other for an interminable amount of time. It's basically
yeah, it's like
a
half an
series
hour almost
Yeah.
of like at least 20 minutes of
Mhm.
just two shots.
Yeah.
Which is another cool thing about how they made this movie is they just paired up all these different actors or dancers and just had them have like a 30-40 minute conversation in character and then just cut the best parts into
Yeah.
the movie.
And there are like jump cuts in there, but they're not like jump cuts where we like immediately there's like a single black frame that like separates our jump
Right.
cuts in this movie. But yeah, like and you start intercutting all these things and it becomes sort of like the dichotomy of seeing like what some people are talking about versus others. And like so there's two characters that are talking about very graphically about intercourse with no lubrication and like mixed with like, you know, some other people. There's like two girls arguing, and then there's like
everybody is either shit talking somebody else in the troupe or they're talking about trying to get laid.
Yeah.
Pretty much every character is talking about one of those two things during this sequence. It's just all these quick snippets of conversation.
Yeah.
You don't pick up on everything.
It's so at one point I was just trying to take notes of like what they were talking about because I thought maybe it would tie back in. This is like second time watching, and I was just like, it just happens so fast, and you kind of get caught up in what they're saying because everyone feels so natural that I don't know. I lost track after a certain point. I only picked up certain things here and there. You set up basically that Omar doesn't drink. He's like the only one of them that's really not drinking. And that one of the two guys you were talking about, non-lubricated sex, also bring up that they believe this place is a weird sect, and they used to do sacrifices there, which I guess is another tie back to Suspiria in some ways. So that the place that they're in feels weird to them. So it also like influences, I guess, their moods going into, you know, the second half of the movie. Which I read an interview with Gaspar Noé, and he described this movie as the first half is a roller coaster and the second half is a ghost train, which feels pretty apt. Although the second half is pretty wild and thrilling.
When it comes to these like snippets of conversation, I really don't know what to say about them. Except you just get just little snippets of their personalities in here. I'm not sure it really pays off much by the end.
Yeah.
The only one that really sticks out in my mind is Saika because as we'll see as we get to the end, she becomes a very important character in this whole thing. And then there's the two dudes that are talking about unlubricated penetration. But that doesn't even really come into play very much.
I mean, one of them does get laid later on in the movie. Spoilers for anybody out there.
Well, then you have the brother and sister character.
Yeah, we do set up them.
Yeah.
And it's set up that he's very protective. And that will come to pay off, I think, later on in the movie.
It's a hangout movie.
Yeah, it is a hangout movie.
It's just a hangout movie.
And it's a great way to like introduce characters without just them being full on stereotypes. Like, you know, like basically fitting like a certain mold of character that would fit into these movies normally.
Yeah, you don't have to have all these scenes where like there's some sort of conflict being set up or, you know, somebody walks in on somebody else in a room and like there's mistrust brewing. They all kind of mistrust each other. I get the feeling that a lot of these characters don't know each other that well.
They've only been together for 3 days. This was third day.
But some of them have history. Like they've maybe danced in other groups before and stuff like that. But then some of them are very new to this whole scene. So nobody really knows each other. and so nobody really trusts each other.
Which sort of builds into their paranoia probably later
Yeah.
on
Mhm.
when things get a little extra sensory. So after all these scenes with like with these two shots, we move into another dance sequence, which is like a top-down one. Still always interesting, still very thrilling, but it is around this section that you start feeling like
What is
maybe
the
the movie
point of all
what is the
this?
point? Like, where is this going? But I love all the dance. The dancing in this movie is
I love that
what
too,
keeps it
because you
interesting.
get to see every character dance on their own and kind of how
Mhm.
they move, when they're not choreographed in any way. And you get to see how they are kind of reacting to the other dancers. Like there's this
Mhm.
one girl, it's the one that wears like the black dress with like the slits cut in it and
Yeah.
everything. She is throughout that whole sequence, she is always kind of dancing on the side.
Mhm.
Most of the other characters are just watching the others, but she's
Yeah.
always kind of dancing. I don't know. That just stuck out to me. I don't know that it means anything.
But during this top-down sequence, there is a record change. And I think that serves as sort of like our change into the second half of the movie, basically.
Yeah. And you
They
also
flip the
get
record over.
the opening credits, quote unquote, during
Oh,
this
that's
scene.
right. Yes, yeah. Right after all this, we
Yeah,
get
because you've had the closing credits at the beginning.
Mhm.
So now you have the opening credits where everybody's name is in like a flashy font. And then it also
Yeah.
credits like all the music that's played throughout the
Mhm.
movie. So it'll be like Daft Punk and the Rolling
Mhm.
Stones and I don't know.
Apex Twins. Yeah, there's all
Apex
kinds
Twins.
of yeah. Which is it's just fun. I do love that about like Gaspar Noé's movies because he did the same thing in Enter the Void. Is that everyone gets a different font and the titles roll through the screen at such a pace that it's like you can't even really read all of them because they're going by so fast.
It's weird to think of a guy who makes such dark, twisted movies as being a playful filmmaker.
I know, right?
But he's so playful, and
Mhm.
that's what keeps you interested throughout the course of the movie. He keeps changing styles in his
Mhm.
filmmaking throughout the movie. I mean, the way the camera moves in the first half is completely different from the way the camera moves in the second half.
Oh yeah. No, we're gliding in the first half for the most part. We're
Yeah,
like
and
on
then there's
sort of
lots
like a
of
steady cam.
locked off two shots of all these
Mhm.
conversations. And then in the second half, the camera is a whole different beast.
So once we flip the record, we move into the second half, and then that's when everything starts to hit the fan. No one even really starts acting weird at first, but you're right, like the camera changes. It becomes like handheld at a certain point.
And also the music changes because before the music has been very much in the forefront. And
Mhm.
then after the switch, the music is sort of muffled in the background.
Becomes like diegetic, like in the scene, and not like
Right.
for an audience at home. And then the really like the turn that really like switches everything is like the Psycha takes a real long pee in the middle of the floor.
Just standing on the
Just
dance
standing on the
floor, just starts peeing, doesn't even squat down, just lets
Nope.
it go.
Just lets it go. And like
Reagan
that's
style from
yeah. And at that point, things start become clear for not only the audience, but some of the characters in the movie that things aren't exactly right. That's when the acid starts to kick in. And that's when we really are introduced that someone has spiked the punch and everyone's been
Yeah.
drinking the sangria. And we start following the interesting thing is that we start following one character that'll lead us into another character. And it's all one take. And you don't really know this as it starts.
I think I read that it was like 42 minutes of this movie
Yeah.
is all one take, which I always wonder about that. Like, is it actually one take or are there like hidden splices?
But I will say that it doesn't appear that way in this movie for the most part.
There are a couple spots where
Yeah.
I feel like they could have hidden a cut,
Mhm.
but I don't know. I don't feel like it doesn't. Yeah, the way the camera is moving because it's
Mhm.
handheld, I don't feel like it would match. I don't know.
The only time I felt that there was a cut was when it was near the end of this sequence, which is jumping ahead a bit, but it's during the sequence when David gets beat up and everyone starts freaking out and it becomes this sort of like inverted red room sex show that's happening
my
on the floor.
gosh.
There's a couple of like flashes to black in there that are like
Yeah.
I could see them doing cuts at that point because it gets pretty disorienting at that point. But for the most part, this whole last half of the movie is one long unbroken take, seemingly at least. And it kind of starts off pretty normal for the most part. I mean, girl
Except
pees
for
on
the
the floor.
peeing in the floor. Yeah.
The pee on the floor. I mean, people are drinking. You kind of assume that but this is really when like people who are like, I guess, familiar with Gaspar Noé's movies are like, oh, it's kicking in now. Now the drugs are really taking hold. So then it just really escalates from that point. And so that after that, they start accusing Omar of drugging everyone.
Yeah.
Because
he's the only one not, well, him and Lou.
But we don't know about Lou
like,
just yet. Yeah.
Yeah. She's kind of removed herself from the situation. She's like, I don't feel well. She's gone back to her room. So
people just
Omar
assume that she'd been drinking. He's been outwardly spoken about, like, I don't drink. I don't want to drink. You know what I mean? And so they just violently freak out and throw him outside and close the door on him. And for the longest while, you kind of forget about Omar. And you're just like, you don't even know that he's been gone for the longest time. But the next thing that happens is, we've already set up that the sangria is tainted. It's got LSD in it, and everyone's drank some of it. But then the kid starts drinking it. And the mom, and that's when it's just like, oh no.
Like the audience, we noticed the kids drinking it long before.
Oh yeah.
Because, the cameras just sort of going this way and that and following characters, but you can see him in the background next to the punch bowl drinking the sangria, but nobody notices for like a good couple minutes.
Good solid little bit, until his mom notices, and she's just like, oh, I gotta get you out of here. And her thinking would be just to put him in maybe the most dangerous spot in the entire place, is an electrical closet. She closes the doors.
I mean, she's had the acid too,
Yeah. And she's not thinking,
she can't think clearly.
Well. Yeah. So she puts him in there and locks the key, locks him in there, and he's screaming the whole time. So he's screaming and banging on the door to get let out.
Anytime you go past that electrical closet, for the next 20 minutes or so,
right,
you just hear a child screaming and banging. And you also know that this child is probably experiencing some pretty terrible hallucinations.
Oh yeah. No, later on he does talk about, there's something in here with me.
Yeah.
There's something about like bugs or something like that. And
but she puts him in there and she just says, don't touch that, it'll kill you.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna lock you in here.
Locks you in there. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Sofia Boutella decides she has to walk away from all this. She's gonna like walk away. So she walks into the back dorm rooms of the place and runs across her friend who hasn't been drinking as well, and reveals to her the strangest way to say that I'm pregnant is, she says, I have something growing in my tummy. And for someone who's probably tripping, like, that is probably opening up your mind to so many, like, what? Not even understanding how to process that. And so they have a quick conversation for a little bit, and then another character shows up. It's the bald lady who's wearing the dress.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Her name is Dom, I think.
Dom. So Dom shows up and immediately accuses her of drugging everybody, because she's like, you haven't been drinking.
She's like,
no, I don't feel well. Sofia Boutella is like, no, she's pregnant. And then Dom just like full on like knees her in the gut, and she falls on the ground and starts screaming,
kicking her
in the stomach. And you're like, oh my God. Like, it goes from this movie goes from like a fun, like chill hangout movie about dance to just like 11 in like a 5-minute period. Kids in danger. People who are impregnated are getting kicked in the stomach. There's people pissing in the floor. It becomes a full-on nightmare. Like, at this point.
Whole time during all of this, I mean, it gets even worse from here. But the whole time, there's always somebody dancing.
Yeah,
they keep going back into that gymnasium or whatever, and there's always some people dancing in there, or there's somebody in the hallway dancing. Like, somebody will be walking down the hall, and then that guy will be in the background just popping and locking, like doing crazy stuff with his
dislocating his arms.
Yeah, it's so surreal. Like, it's one of the most surreal experiences. Did you see it in the theater?
No, I didn't. It never played here in theaters. I really wanted to.
It didn't. The only reason I got to see it is because I was living in Austin at the time.
Oh yeah.
And so Alamo Drafthouse, of course, showed it. But I was so happy I got to see it in the theater, because it is immersive is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Like,
I would say
that's what this movie is it's not really, there's little stories and characters happening throughout, but it's really just about the experience of the entire thing.
Once it really takes hold, you kind of already start to like some of these characters, or you at least understand them in a certain way.
Even if they seem like kind of a piece of shit. Like, you don't want anything bad to happen to them. They're just there to dance, and have fun. And man, one person ruins it all.
The thing is, the the crazy thing is, if she had just told them and then spiked it, like, I don't feel like everyone would have freaked out as bad because they didn't know that they were
Right.
drugged, and
And
then the come on for it.
I think that's a big part of this movie is it's
Right.
just the mind going places that it didn't expect to go
Mhm.
and being sort of forced into a situation.
People fall apart so quickly. Like, this is the worst parts of like humanity become apparent with
Yeah.
these characters who seemed pretty down to earth. Some of them seemed a little extreme before, but everyone seemed like normal people until
Yeah.
you drug them, and everything falls to shit. But after that, so
Yeah. What happens next?
they end up back at the kitchen, and so Sophia Botella is trying to leave after this whole thing of the one lady getting kicked in the stomach. She's trying to get out of there, and she wanders back in the kitchen, and for some reason, someone has an open Bunsen burner going, and the one girl who's been doing cocaine the entire time.
Yeah,
Someone
we
comes
didn't
up
even
to her,
talk
and she's
about
like,
her, but like, yeah,
"Oh yeah,
she's a big cokehead. She's been on the stairs snorting,
mm-hmm.
and people been trying to hit her up for coke, and she's like, I don't have any more coke, but
I
she
don't got any
totally
more."
has more coke.
Oh, 100%. So someone comes up again and is like, I need some, give me some of that coke. She's like, no, get out of here. She pushes her and like completely sets her hair on fire in the middle of this room.
Which I
And
have to imagine that's the only digital effect in this movie.
it looks pretty realistic, but it was also, I don't know, like if they timed it right, because that person was gone for a very long time, and then she doesn't really ever show
True.
back up until the very end. They could have done it, but
Maybe,
I
but
don't know.
if it's a real stunt, it's impressive that they pulled it off.
Especially
Because
midway through this long
this is not
take.
a stunt performer. This is a professional dancer.
Yeah, right. Oh man, then we end up back into the main room where everybody turns on, is it Lou? I keep forgetting all these
Yeah,
characters'
because
names.
Lou comes out, she's been kicked in the stomach repeatedly by
Mhm.
Dom. So she stumbles back in there and she's hysterical at this point. Notably, she's one of the people that's not tripping on acid, but she's been
Mhm.
so thoroughly beaten and everybody else is tripping on acid. So they're all just like, oh, kill yourself, kill yourself. We know you did this to us.
At which point she grabs a knife off the table and begins to, well,
Just
first she
starts
starts punching herself in the stomach, and then just starts, well, she punches herself in the stomach and then immediately starts bleeding from her private region, from
right.
her and
Which
then she just,
that seems a little not medically accurate, but
it doesn't, and you can kind of tell when it's coming too, because like the camp, like she like bends down, and then like we pan back over to the crowd, and we
yeah.
come back, and then she's bleeding. It's like one of the only times that you can feel the fake, like you can feel like it when it doesn't feel right in the moment. But then she starts cutting herself, and all that looks pretty real for the most part.
I don't know how they did that. Yeah.
But she starts cutting her arm, she starts cutting her face, and all the whole while everyone's just chanting for her to kill herself, and she's slowly losing her mind as well, just because of the group psychosis that is happening with these people who are like tripping on
Yeah.
acid. David tries to corner Selva again, which is Sophia Botella's character. She screams at him, and then immediately has this possession style dance freak out in the room with the trees in
which
it.
is an amazing performance that she gives
Mhm.
there. Like she's just given over herself freely to
Mhm.
the mindset of this character and the psychosis that's taken hold of her. It is impressive. I can't remember the name of the actor in Possession that does a similar thing. What's her name? Isabel Adjani. That's the
it.
name of the actor from Possession.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which the first time I saw this movie, I had not seen Possession.
Oh,
So
same. Yeah.
so that
Hadn't
being
really,
on
yeah.
the video stack in the opening of the movie would not have stood out to me at all.
You've
But
probably seen that sequence though in the subway tunnel.
no,
Oh.
before I saw Possession, I knew literally nothing about it.
Oh.
Yeah, I went into that movie cold just by reputation. Everybody was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is a really cool one.
And it
We
was
have to
like
cover that on the show at some point."
hidden. Oh no, we have to. And it was like a hidden gem. It like disappeared for like
Right.
years and years and years. You couldn't find it or see it. Which I'm glad is back now.
And that whole sequence though with Sophia Patella is beautiful because there's this mural on the wall with like the forest, and she just stares at that for a little bit before collapsing on the couch, and she sticks her hands down her pantyhose and
Mhm. Just trying to feel something else. And then
yeah.
there's a point right before she gets up. You can feel there's a moment in there where like she can't move her hands, and she is like forgotten that she put them in her pantyhose, and you can kind of see her almost like freak out for a second, like she can't move them. I love that. That's my favorite like little bit.
I
there.
love Sophia Boutella. She's been great in other things.
Mhm.
She's really good in Kingsman.
Kingsman is
It's
like
not a big
the
part,
knife.
but she's
Yeah,
got
she was like
knife
knife feet.
legs.
Yeah.
And then she did her best in that Mummy movie, but that movie was terrible.
There was nothing she could do to save that movie.
Yeah. But I feel like she's like a real movie star, and she just doesn't get the
Mhm.
opportunity to flex those muscles very often. But
For sure. No, and she almost didn't take this role because everyone else was professional dancers and she had danced. She has like dance experience, but like because she wasn't a professional dancer, she was like, I don't think I could hang with them.
yeah.
And
But
then
yet
they eventually convinced her to.
she gets the trailer shot out of that first big dance sequence where she
Oh yeah.
like goes down on her back and slides across the floor. And it's just like, okay, this woman can move too.
So then after she freaks out, she starts heading back into the dance area again. There's a lot of coming and going, which, you know,
Which every time you go back into that dance area, the tone changes just a little bit more. Yeah.
it gets a little bit darker, a little bit
Yeah.
scarier. And when she goes back this time, she runs into the mom who has lost the key to get Tito out of the closet, who is still
Yeah.
screaming, by the way, still yelling to be let loose, and they literally can't now. So Selva freaks out. She's like, go find the key. But yeah, so heads back in there. David gets beat up by, I think it's the brother of the sister. So there's a brother-sister duo that are happening. I can't remember who beats him up, but I think it's him. And that's when the lights go out and someone says the lights completely cut out. And that's when someone says, Tito's dead.
Yeah,
and
they say Tito got fried.
Yeah, Tito got fried.
They don't even say it in a nice way. Like, and they're laughing about it.
Yeah. As an audience, somewhere in the back of your head, like because you didn't see it, in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe he's still okay. Maybe Tito is still alive in the closet, but something else happened.
As soon as the emergency lights come on, I'm just like, when I saw this movie the first time, I was just like, oh shit.
I was just hoping Tito would be alive. But knowing this is a Gaspar Noé movie, I was like, it's actually just surprising we didn't see Tito fry on camera, in all honesty.
It's almost more unsettling that you don't, though.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
Like, because the situation has been so thoroughly set up for you that as soon as those lights change, because, yeah, it's red emergency lights, like you immediately know. I mean, the characters immediately know what happened. So do you. And it's heart-wrenching, really.
After this, I believe it's the other lady who is the one who was German friends with.
Wait,
it's not the German. It was her, the one that was her interested in her. But
yeah.
So at this point, she grabs Selva because she's just looking to get down with anybody. I think that will get down with her. So they go back to her room and they start, enjoying each other's company. And that's when David shows up. It's just like, I really want to be with you. And they're like, get out,
David.
And so they kick David out. He ends up back into the big room. And that's where we get into this upside down sequence where everything is red and it becomes this sort of like almost orgy of like dance and sex and just like strange body movements.
I didn't count how long the camera is upside down at the end of this movie, but it's like most of the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah, no, the whole end of the whole like last at least 5 minutes of it is just upside down.
Yeah.
And it's like impossible to get your bearings on, especially with it being red and like dark and like the music is still going and it's just like disorienting. It's sort of like that build up to like this whole thing is like the high is really peaking at this point as far as like an audience and our characters go.
I mean, it's very clearly it's supposed to be like hell. This is turned into a complete hell world at this point. Right. And some of the people are still having fun.
Yeah. Which is our blonde psycho.
Well, not just her, but like, there's people just like having sex.
That's true.
They're not hurting anyone. There's nothing to suggest that it's non-consensual.
Sure.
And then there's one other character that also like just kind of having a fun time during that. I can't remember the character's name, but seems to be a non-binary person. The one that the little one that's always kind of the DJ is always kind of comforting. I don't know if that character identifies as male or female, so I don't want to speculate. So I'll just say they. But they seem to have an okay time, except for they get a little sad at the end of the night.
That's yeah. Well, I mean, they make a big advance towards David at one point, and David's not having it. And then they end up back in the room, being comforted. So not everyone, that is the nice part about this movie too, is that it doesn't feel as bleak as it could have been, where everyone
Right.
is having a terrible time. We completely devolve into just the
And some of
what that
them
says about
probably don't
humanity or
even
not, I don't know.
realize what is going on, you know.
Sure.
They're so drugged up at this point that they're just completely oblivious and they're living in their own
Mhm.
world. We can get through sort of the rest of the plot and then we can have a talk about psychedelic
Sure.
experiences.
Sure. We end up at the very end of the movie. We've flipped back over. The world's right side up is next day. There's a title that comes on right before that. That is "Life is a Collective Impossibility," which
Oh goodness.
it kind of feels that like that's the one title that I was like, okay, that one makes the most sense there. I think. Basically, the police have broken open the door. There's this stark white exterior to this sort of red, dingy sex dungeon theme they have going on
Yeah.
inside this school. And then we're treated to a lot of top-down shots, seeing where all of our characters ended up.
Yeah.
Which we go through every character in the movie, including Tito, who we realize is dead. The most disturbing one in here, though, is the girl by the sink whose hair caught fire,
And she's just trying to cool off her head
just
and
like
she's
barely touching it. Yeah.
screaming and yeah.
Mhm.
It's really painful to watch because
Um,
there's nothing worse than a burn. Yeah.
especially one that you can't see and really treat, and it's like
Right.
behind your head. Oh, I can't
Yeah.
imagine. But at the end of the sequence, we end with our German lady whose name is
Psycha.
Psycha. We end with Psycha, and we reveal that she is taking LSD again after having done it all night long. Is dropping it into her eyes. And there's
Yeah.
like a book on the ground that says taking LSD for recreation or something like that. And then we fade out to our title, which is Climax.
Yeah. Somebody pointed out, and I noticed this too, but they put it better than I did. Like the entire length of the second half of this movie, where you're following all this chaos throughout this whole building. Like every time you see Psycha, she's just kind of in the background watching everything
Oh yeah,
that's going on. She's
smiling
enjoying
sometimes.
this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like it is and when you watch it a second time and you notice and you know that she's the one that's done this, like it is she is truly one of the most horrible horror villains that we have.
Just enjoying this mayhem that is happening to everybody. Also, along with that, I forgot to say the only real two, I guess, people who die. Well, there's three. Omar dies in the snow because he froze to death. That's our comeback to
Yeah.
Omar, and then the lady, the choreographer lady, commits suicide because Tito is dead, and then Tito dies. So there was
Yeah.
three deaths.
Well, we don't really know what happens to Lou. She could
That's
be
true.
dead because she's the one we saw at the beginning of the movie wandering through the
Right.
snow
Right.
and bleeding.
It's possibility. The possibility, I guess, is still out there that she is alive because we do see her at the beginning of the movie. But what a wild ride this movie is. The last 40 minutes or so are probably some of the most intense 42 minutes, sustained 42 minutes I've seen in a long while in a movie. And the fact that it's like an unbroken shot for the most part is it really puts you into like your character's headspace.
Yeah.
Because we do jump around characters quite a bit. We move from one character to the next, and like you really start to feel like the world kind of collapsing around them.
And then there are just little moments here and there. Like, for example, like most of the lighting throughout the building is red because it's the emergency lights. But there's that one scene where the blonde girl is taking Selva down the hallway and they turn, and then the hallway is green, which is equally menacing in its own way because as we've learned from Disney movies, green is the real evil color. The fact that they were able to make that transition seamlessly from one type of lighting to another in that one take, I don't know. I don't know as much about cameras and filmmaking as you do, but I feel like that would be difficult to do.
With it being one shot, like you're gonna need, and maybe they did a cut whenever the lights fully clamped out. I couldn't remember if they did a cut to black before the red came on. I think they did. I think it cuts black and then comes right back on.
Yeah.
So they probably did a cut there. There's probably one of the ways they hid one of their cuts, but
Mhm.
maybe they did a cut there. If not, then someone was like changing the lights as they were in another part of the room, like
Yeah.
actively like changing stuff around. Like doing a shot like that is not just like making sure your focus is okay. There's so much choreography of to where people are and getting them like in a headspace for when you leave them and then come back to them. Like I can't
Yeah.
even wrap my head around it.
Yeah, that's the other thing is you have all these non-actors giving these amazing performances, and a lot of it is just physical. It's just physically embodying somebody who is under the influence of a powerful psychedelic. But the fact that they're all just sort of staying in that mode, and I don't know the total ins and outs of the production. You know, maybe they got to stop dancing whenever the camera left the room, but I don't know. Maybe they didn't.
Maybe they didn't. Maybe they're just like, dance. You're going to dance for the next 40 minutes.
Yeah.
We're going to get it all in one take.
I tell you,
don't
the
know.
really unsettling shot is when the cops come in and everybody's laying on the floor except for Saika, who is
still just dancing
happily. She's very witchy. And I don't mean to cast aspersions on witches, but
of course not. Spooky. She's very spooky in that way.
She's very Okay, let's talk a little bit about psychedelic experiences. I don't know how familiar you are with this world. I'm a little bit, but I can say from experience, this movie feels accurate, at least from the perspective of watching someone from the outside go through this sort of thing. Because, you know, most other movies, when they have a psychedelic sequence, it's you go into the person's head, you see what they're seeing. And this movie is all like an observant point of view, where you're just watching how the characters actually are behaving in the moment. And it feels very real.
You're right. Like anytime anybody goes into a drug addled state in movies, I'm thinking like Fear and Loathing, we go through their mind's eye sort of thing.
Yeah,
like seeing
you
what
see
they
lizard people or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But like it's so much more unsettling to see people act unnaturally in the real world, and we don't know what they're seeing. Like it almost makes it scarier for in some ways, because we're not on the same level that they are. I can't imagine if you took acid and watched this movie. I don't know what that would do to you or say about you as a person.
I'll have to see what I have going on Monday night, but
well, I'm all right. I got about a 6-hour period. I'm gonna watch this 3 times.
I will say I haven't watched a lot of movies on acid. Normally, if I've done something like that, I like to go out in nature and sort of experience like the trees and the rocks and the wind.
Look at the clouds.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I did see There Will Be Blood on acid one time.
Oh no. In
a theater, by the way.
Okay.
This was not when it first came out. This was like a repertory screening of it. And Daniel Day-Lewis's face was very waxy and melty throughout the movie.
Okay. Usually it's nature is the best place to be.
Right.
Once ended up at a Viking fest, and that was too much. There were berserkers and they were screaming and having screaming contests, and I was like, I cannot be here right now.
Yeah.
It was a good time though.
I mean, the first time I ever did anything like that was at Bonnaroo. So very colorful, but it's outdoors, you know.
Yeah. You can wander off into the woods.
You're just kind of wandering around. You're hearing all this music. It was a very beautiful, pleasant day, which leads me to my next point is, you know, the characters in this movie, they don't know that they're on acid. It slips to them. It doesn't really allow you the mental power of controlling your own trip, which is something I always tell to people whenever they're talking about like, I don't know if I would ever want to do that. I am afraid of having a bad trip. It's like, no, you're going to have the kind of trip that you determine based on your mindset going into something like that. And so as long as you're in the right headspace and you can make your own decisions about the trip you're going to have, you'll be fine, because the world around you is not changing. The only thing that's changing is in your mind,
your perception of it. Yeah.
Right. I haven't had like tons of trips. It's something I've done a few times over the years, but I've never had a bad one. I've always felt like it was a very cathartic experience for me.
Sure.
I can't imagine a situation like this where I was forced into it without my knowledge.
No, I can't imagine being in a situation where I was given something and didn't know it. Like that is probably like to realize it as you're starting to like come up would be, in some ways you just accept it. That is probably the easiest thing. The best way to do it would be just to accept that it's happening. But
Right.
there would be a part of you that's like, I wasn't prepared mentally for this. I'm going to try to fight it, which you absolutely should not do.
And these people have apparently been given a very heavy dose.
A lot.
Because it's just in the punch bowl, they're just drinking sangria. So they're also getting drunk at the same time. They're drinking throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's the never ending punch bowl of sangria.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People continue to drink after they know it's spiked. They just keep going back to it. So some people are, I think, accepted, and they're like ready to go on this trip.
Right.
And I think some people fight it, which we mostly follow the people around who are trying to fight it.
Oh, we didn't talk about the incest part.
Oh yeah, it gets a little it never takes it too far, but it does get pretty like it gets pretty cringy for a long while with these two.
But Gazelle Gazelle and Taylor, that's the brother and sister. Yeah, Gazelle is one of the people that continues to drink the sangria after it's revealed that something has been put in it, and then it gets really weird. They're like people smearing shaving cream on each other. She's got lipstick all over her face, and we don't ever really know what happened between Gazelle and Taylor.
Right.
We don't know what they wanted to happen. The only thing we see at the end is him just saying nothing happened, but don't tell dad.
Tell dad. Yeah. Yeah. And you're just like, oh
yeah, it's
and they're both like half dressed in bed.
Yeah.
In like someone's bed. And it's like, people acting on their worst desires.
Yeah.
Because they can, because they are uninhibited. You know what I mean? It's just like people feeling the need to do whatever they want because the situation has presented itself, acting on their most base animalistic instincts.
Yeah, I mean it's Lord of the Flies again.
Yeah, but with acid.
With acid and dancers.
Dancers, yeah. Which would have really spiced up Lord of the Flies if they had just added more dancers and acid to it. I'd watch that movie any day.
So I guess we should talk about, what do you think this movie's about? Because I'm really not sure.
I think the broader thing, it has to be about sort of like humanity's willingness to completely accept their animal sides or to de-evolve as soon as the situation presents itself.
Yeah.
And like they use acid here, but it's really like I think it could have been anything. You know what I mean? If they had just been drinking, like these things would have happened as well. Or you know what I mean? Like if they use it as sort of like the excuse in order to like completely debauch themselves.
Do you think there's any significance in the fact that most of these characters are French, except for Saika, who is the one that sends them on this unwilling trip?
And she does speak English.
And she's German.
She's German.
Which, France and Germany, quite a history there.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be me reaching for something that isn't there, but
I mean, it's there. I think there's a specific choice to make her German and to make her essentially speak English the entire time.
Yeah.
Which is one of very few characters who actually do. So I think there is something there. What it exactly means in the context of the movie, I don't know for sure. But
yeah, it's like she's the predatory force, which somebody else pointed out, like her peeing in the floor, that's like a predator marking its territory.
Oh, yeah.
Which
that's
something that's something I did not think about until somebody else said it. I was watching a video essay earlier and I was like, oh man, that's a really significant moment in this movie.
Yeah. So there's little clues that she's the one who's done it this entire time, like sprinkled throughout the movie. She's the one who spiked the punch, which becomes the big sort of thing, is that everyone they start turning on each other because they suspect, it's like the
it's Omar, it's Lou,
it's Omar,
or it's Emmanuel,
because
she made the punch. Yeah,
she's the one who, if you're paying attention, and really on second watch, if you really watch, like she's the one that's like, oh yeah, she definitely did it. She's the one.
And she gets in the opening, well, I say opening, the dance sequence that takes place 10 minutes into the movie, she gets a real centerpiece because she's wearing this little mini dress, but then she takes off the dress. She's wearing this sparkly bikini and she rides around and everybody kind of surrounds her and is dancing around her. Yeah. So that's another clue.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's like a completely revealing piece too. Like she's literally shedding like her clothes. Like no one else in there does that. So
she's the most naked of all of them.
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
Climax. Go watch it.
I mean, we've already told you everything that happens in it, but it really doesn't do it justice. This, like I said earlier, this is a movie that's more about the experience of watching it than it is about 100%. The plot or the characters. It's very different from Antichrist, but they're both more experiential movies in a sense. I don't know. These Europeans, they're nuts.
They're nuts. They do a lot of crazy things. I guess we could get into ratings. So what would you rate the themes? Well, actually, we'll start with filmmaking. What would you rate the filmmaking of Climax?
Oh, it's a straight up 5. It's an extraordinary piece of filmmaking. Like, just, he uses every technique in the book, the music, the sound, the cinematography, the colors. The colors in this movie are popping all over the place. Mm-hmm. There's just nothing like it to watch it. So it's a 5, easy.
What about theme?
The imaginary number, I don't know. I don't know what this movie's really about. But I'll be a little generous. I'll pull a Drew and be generous. I'll give it a 3 because I think there's enough there that you can sort of, we've had a nice chat about it, and a lot of it's just been breaking down the story and talking about the production and all the techniques used. But the idea is sort of exploring the mind, but doing it in a way that's completely outside of that. And, kind of forcing you into a sort of situation that you're just having to observe. I think that's enough theme in itself. Can it be? I don't know.
Of course. I mean, he basically made the audience trip sitters for like all these people. Is that we're forced to sort of like see them become the worst versions of themselves.
Yeah,
or the
and
best
so
versions,
even if the movie isn't really like about a thesis or whatever, I think the experience of watching it is so profound that it at least elevates it in some way.
To be honest, I was thinking about it before we got on here. I was going to give it the exact same score. I was going to give it a 5 in filmmaking, which is a little boring because we were giving the exact same score.
Full of surprises here. Me and Eric giving things the same score.
Exact same score. And for the same reasons, like it's a beautifully shot and rendered movie. But as far as like theme goes, there's something there. I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't really know how to articulate it, even of like how the movie, and it's really a feeling more than a thesis, like you were saying, like a feeling that it gives you about people and like the way it feels to be caught up in a situation bigger than itself. I don't know. It's pretty overwhelming in some spots.
I promise y'all, one of these days we're gonna pick a movie in this little series that actually has a thesis that it's trying to make. Maybe Possession will be that movie. Maybe. I actually have a lot of thematic things to say about Possession, but
maybe we'll never get to that. Who knows?
Maybe it'll be like this and Antichrist, and it's like we don't know what this movie's about. It's just crazy.
It's crazy, but you should watch it. It's very extreme, very extreme. But I guess so our rating for Climax is a 8 out of 10.
So if any of y'all listen to the sort of mainline episodes of this podcast, we had a guest named Emma James to talk about Brian De Palma movies. And she is quite the aficionado of extreme horror. She loves herself some like really weird, fucked up shit. And one of the movies that I know she loves probably more than any person ever to walk the earth is Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
H2.
So I think that's going to be our next episode.
Coming up next month on Extreme Horror, we've got the seminal Halloween sequel, H2, by
that almost everybody hates, except for
almost everyone. Yeah,
us and Emma.
I do think it gets a bad rep. I know there are a lot of people out there who vehemently hate this movie, but I think there's a lot of things going for it that a lot of people discount.
Right. And Emma will have way more informed and educated things to say about it.
So that has been Climax. Please tune in next time for some H2 love for our good friend Rob Zombie. We don't know him. He's not really our friend. But if you like this episode and want more spooky and weird content, and probably maybe some extreme content, make sure that you slash that subscribe button, Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Horror Sci-Fi and Beyond, and don't forget to give it a killer comment and this episode a King Kong size thumbs up. And never forget to stay weird and extreme and watch a lot of pretentious, foreign art movies or whatever.
Good night, y'all.